few hours after Iran targeted a U.S. military base in Qatar in retaliation to the U.S. strike against 3 Iranian nuclear sites this past weekend, Donald Trump on his social media platform claimed a ceasefire between Israel and Iran was in place to end their 12-day military conflict. We have more on Press Perspective today. Hello and welcome to Press Perspective for this Tuesday, June 24th here in Seoul. I'm Min Sunhee. So, are tensions in the Middle East over Iran's nuclear weapons ambitions simmering down? Well, to answer that question and more, I have Celio Fioretti with French daily Le Croix here in the studio. Celio, welcome back.
Glad to be here.
I also have Ruy Valdes with Spanish news agency EFE Spain with us. Ruy, it's been a while. Welcome back.
I'm glad to be here, Sonny.
Celio, let's take this in chronological order. First, could you walk us through the events that led to the Trump administration's attack against Iranian nuclear facilities this past weekend?
Sure. I think for that we need to even go back a bit in time. Back in 2018, during Trump's first mandate, President Trump pulled a nuclear deal between Iran and the US, and reimposed tough sanctions. Over the next year, there were also an oil tanker attack, drone shootdowns, and rising violence across the region. And things really boiled over in late 2019 when an American contractor was killed in Iraq, and the US blamed the militias, Iranian militias that launched the attack. And days later, they killed Iranian General Qasem Soleimani. And at the time, we thought we were close to war with some missile launched by Iran. Yet this past weekend, President Trump made one of the most consequential military decisions of his presidency. In complete secrecy, he ordered Operation Midnight Hammer, a U.S. strike targeting 3 key Iranian nuclear sites, Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan. What is remarkable in what unfolded this weekend is how secretive it was. On Friday evening, Trump appeared quite relaxed at his golf club in New Jersey, but behind the scenes, already B-2 stealth bombers were already taking off, loaded with 30,000-pound bunker busters bombs, and ready for an 18-hour flight across the world to reach Iran. This came weeks after weeks of behind-the-scene planning. Trump publicly given Iran a 60-day deadline to come back to the negotiating table. Then he was saying he was not sure if he would intervene in the conflict between Israel and Iran. So he was kind of like putting a lot of fog around this decision that was apparently already made in his mind. The mission involved over 125 aircraft, bombers, fighters, refueling planes, and it was so secretive that even Democrats in Washington didn't know it was happening up until the very last minute. The Iranian government was only warned that the strikes would target some specific site, and it was not an all-out war. But still, after what happened, we're not sure in really what situation we are right now in the Middle East. Saturday night, Trump addressed the nation, calling the strike a spectacular success. And so far, after what happened this weekend, he announced a ceasefire. Apparently, it has been brokered already by Iranian military forces. So it's very unstable. I think the situation might evolve quickly in the days, hours to come.
Right. Actually, Celia, I was going to ask you that Mr. Trump addressed the public right off a couple of hours after the attack itself, and his message appeared to be relatively short.
Yes, President Trump addressed the nation late Saturday after ordering this massive airstrike. He called it a spectacular military success, saying the goal was to wipe out Iran nuclear's program, enrichment capacity especially, and stop the growing, what he called the growing nuclear threat from Iran. Trump claimed the site has been completely obliterated and warned Iran against any retaliation. He said there will be either peace or tragedy for Iran. He added that the U.S. still has many targets he could strike in a matter of minutes. He didn't mention which one exactly. He described Iran as the bully of the Middle East and counted 40 years of hostile relationship between U.S. and Iran since the the revolution that happened in the 70s. He also thanked Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu and praised the cooperation between US and Israel, calling a team like perhaps no team has ever worked before. That's his word. Trump congratulated American service members also for executing their mission. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth insisted that the operation apparently avoided any civilian casualties. We have not seen any real clear countdown of casualties that happen, military or civilian. But Iran condemned this attack as a brutal aggression from the US and promised a response. They did bomb some bases in Qatar. But after this sort of ceasefire, we don't know exactly what will be the further response from Iran. We saw that maybe apparently they broke the ceasefire. We'll see how that could escalate. What is also interesting is that many people in the US were worried that it could escalate into a World War III. J.D. Vance took the microphone to sort of reassure American citizens, saying that it was, in any case, it would not be a prolonged war, whatever he means by that. But for the US, at least, they want to make a sort of surgical strike, like really short, not get involved into too much war. That was a promise by Donald Trump to bring peace, at least for the US troops. We'll see if that will stand with the current situation.
Right. Right then, Ruy, as Celio mentioned, Iran condemned the attack. Could you walk us through Iran's response?
Yes, the immediate response of Iran, as Celio was saying, they fired 19 missiles to Al Udeid air base of the US. But 13 of these missiles were intercepted, there was no casualties, and apparently Iran reported, made an early warning to the US to reduce the damage. So basically it was more like a symbolic response. And quickly after, well, the situation developed into this ceasefire that we still don't know, we seem to be knowing right now as we're speaking that it has been very brief.
Right. Now, hours after Iran's attack against the military base in Qatar that you mentioned, US President Donald Trump took to his social media platform to claim that a ceasefire was on track between Israel and Iran. Could you tell us a bit about that?
Yes, Trump was very proud of announcing this ceasefire of what he called a 12-day war. He said basically that both parts, Iran and Israel, came to him and he acted as the mediator and resolved this issue. Basically what he said, it was a complete and total ceasefire and called it the end of the war. On the other hand, as I tell you, around 10 minutes ago, the defense minister of Israel reported that they detected Iran missiles in direction towards their country. So this would mean that in around 4 hours or so, Iran has broke this ceasefire. The story gets interesting because after this Trump announcement that, of course, covered all media and everybody was paying a lot of attention, some pundits that usually are even against Trump were talking about how sophisticated was this operation and then the following negotiation. But if this ceasefire has been broken by Iran as we speak and there's going to still be conflict, this would put Trump in a very difficult situation because it will contradict all that he was saying just a few hours ago. Just to clarify also, the Israel defense minister said that they detected the Iran missiles and they will respond forcibly against it. So basically this news still developing and still we need to wait quite a long time to really know how it's going to resolve.
Right, for sure. As you mentioned, Ruy, it is an evolving situation right now in the Middle East as we speak. Celio, in the meantime, how has the international community, including South Korea, been responding to the events in the Middle East?
The international reaction to the US strike on Iran nuclear facilities has been quite mixed, ranging from alarm to cautious approval. Across the Middle East, many countries expressed deep concern. Saudi Arabia called for urgent diplomacy. Iraq, Qatar, Pakistan warned the strike could further destabilize an already unstable region. Iran's allies like Houthi in Yemen and Hamas strongly condemned the US attack, qualifying it a coward and a threat to global peace. In contrast, Israel celebrated the strikes. Prime Minister Netanyahu thanked the President Trump and said the operation was carried out with full coordination of Israel and a great success. In Europe, with US allies, the response was quite measured. The UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer supported efforts to stop Iran's nuclear ambition, but urged a return to diplomacy to avoid any escalation. Same goes with France and Germany that expressed the same concern and called for returning back to diplomacy and de-escalation of the conflict. Same goes also with the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres. He warned of the catastrophic consequences and condemned any escalation by the US. And in Asia, South Korea has called an emergency security meeting over the weekend and is currently monitoring the situation very closely, especially given its reliance on oil and energy imports from the region. Iran threatened to block the Hormuz Strait that would disrupt massively the old trade routes. So that's very important for a country like South Korea that benefit from this flow of commerce there. So far, the Korean government is monitoring the situation. Also, one thing to note is that 100 Korean citizens are living in Iran. Around half of them have moved to Turkmenistan up north to avoid any danger. Overall, the world is watching with quite unease the situation and worried that it could spiral into a broader conflict in the region.
Right. Hopefully not, though. Ruy, prior to Mr. Trump's decision to strike 3 Iranian nuclear sites this past weekend, he spoke about giving the country, well, Iran that is, about 2 weeks before he makes his decision, a final decision. His decision, though, it came 2 days after his announcement that he would give a window of 2 weeks. What are pundits saying about the possible reasons behind this sudden strike by the US against Iran?
Yeah, well, very interestingly, the New York Times published a very detailed article of how Trump took that decision. And what they indicate is that he already gave a green light to the operation even before he announced this 2 weeks break to take the decision. This doesn't mean that he couldn't cancel at last minute the decision, but it seems that he was leaning more and more on the bombarding these nuclear facilities than to the truce. What are the reasons behind it, or the possible reasons? One could be that intelligence indicated an imminent threat, that Iran was actually building a nuclear weapon and was very close to achieve it. This theory is one of the less mentioned in general, because even US intelligence and international organizations have pointed out that there was no evidence that Iran was close to achieving this objective, this nuclear objective. They also call a diplomatic breakdown, that maybe when he announced that there was some kind of argument and they couldn't reach an agreement, and he just said, let's just bombard these facilities. One of the ones that it's being mentioned a lot is Israel pressure. Israel could have acted as a lobbyist to attract US and tell, look, right now we have Iran weakened at its most. Hezbollah and Hamas has been significantly or completely degraded. So this is the best moment to reduce all the nuclear capabilities of this threat, as they consider. So US and Trump could have measured risk and say, well, yeah, they actually have a point. This is the best moment to attack. And so they did, and they rushed into that decision. My take, or our take, it goes in that line, that Iran was clearly more weak than long time than before, and Israel and US saw this rare opportunity that they could attack hard. And I think the main point that's still of discussion right now is that if the claims of US that they do not want a regime change are actually gonna hold. Why? Because as we have seen, as we have been mentioning in this discussion, many of the things that Trump has been saying publicly don't necessarily coincide with the way he decides to go in the end. So, in principle, Israel and US are not seeking to change the regime in Iran, but still not clear what is their strategy for the day after. And this means that, okay, let's say they don't immediately seek for this regime change, but this Iran regime, theocratic regime, is going to be as weak, even more weak as before after the attack. So probably this will cause an internal conflict of people that are against the current powers. And this could complicate the situation, because then you will have these countries, Israel and US, now trying to decide what to do if they created a crisis in Iran. Just to finalize, this problem, another problem has been mentioned in the part of Israel, that Netanyahu, the leader of Israel, has been following kind of a policy of war to take a grip on power. Before he started the conflict, well, he didn't start it, but he reacted to the attacks that Hamas made in Israel. His popularity was very low. And after he starting attacking the Gaza Strip, his power started consolidating again. And it seems that this attack to Iran, in a way, is extending this trend that he has been having. So basically, the lack of a day-after policy has been seen already in Netanyahu in this other conflict, and now it seems that it could be also a problem from the US.
Right. Well, an end game to the situation in the Middle East appears quite vague as we speak. Celio, against this backdrop of tensions in the Middle East, this year's NATO summit is scheduled to start later today over in the Netherlands. Now, I suppose it's only logical to assume that the issues in the Middle East will dominate the discussions. What are your thoughts?
Yes, I think it will be on the table, and the question is whether the NATO allies will rally up behind the US. And I would say yes, but not without any complication and sort of compromise or conditions. NATO will likely show a broad rhetorical support for the US, especially in light of the escalating tension in the Middle East. However, behind the scene, things might not be so settled. President Trump arrived at the summit after just overseeing this massive strike in Iran. And also, it is combined with a demand to its allies in NATO to spend at least 5% of the GDP on defense, including Asian partners like Korea. And that's a lot of things to ask to allies to support a current military operation and to increase the budget on defense. Countries closest to Russia, for example, like Poland or the Baltic countries, have already agreed to Trump's increase on budget, but that's something they already were planning to do anyway, because the tension in the region make them worry that Russia could attempt any sort of operation against them. Other countries that are more less concerned or maybe are struggling economically, like Spain, has already publicly rejected it. Prime Minister Sanchez of Spain said he will not abide by the 5%. They apparently managed to reach a compromise that is not settled down yet, but it would be 3.5% instead of the 5%. Other countries like France and Germany are okay with 5%, but I think there might be a sort of strategy behind saying like, okay for the 5%, but for France, for example, over the weekend, President Emmanuel Macron said maybe it would be beneficial to buy European products and not rely on US products. So it's a sort of compromise that will be surely talked during these 2 days of NATO summit. The deal is far from being signed. There will be a lot of discussion. Yes, NATO will appear to rally behind the US, but we'll have to see how it really concretizes in actions and what will be done in Europe. Maybe also we'll see from Asian partners. South Korean president will not be part of the NATO summit, but the security advisor will be. So maybe there will be some change also for South Korea that is really concerned with this 5%. It's a lot of money. There will be, if they accept, they will have to make cuts in other parts of Korean budget. Given the current economic situation of Korea, it might be difficult to enforce it. So I think whether it's from Europe or Korea, it will be interesting to see how far the loyalty to NATO and to the US will extend.
Right. Ruy, as Celio just mentioned, President Lee Jae-myung is not attending this year's NATO summit in the Netherlands, but he is sending his top security advisor, Wee Sung-nak. What do you suppose are the broader implications of this particular decision?
Well, the presidential office has claimed domestic priorities, but I think Seoul may be dodging the U.S. military pressure. Why? As Celio was mentioning, South Korea was not the only country to cancel, or the leader to cancel their attendance to this NATO summit. Japan and Australia did the same, and many pundits think it's related to the fact that there will be this big announcement of the NATO members of increasing their contribution significantly to defense. And although Japan, Australia, and South Korea are not members of NATO, of course, the Pentagon has said recently that they are considering North Korea as part of the South Korea as part of the countries that they will have to increase their contribution to 5% of their GDP. Just to put it in context, right now South Korea contributes 2.32% of their GDP in national defense, so it's almost more than a double increase. To be fair with the presidential office, they also quoted the situation in the Middle East, and Celio was also mentioning how important or how damaging would be if Iran decides to close the Strait of Hormuz. South Korea right now, the imports oil, their national imports of oil are around 70% of their total. And 99% of these imports that come from the Middle East go through that Hormuz Strait. It doesn't mean that other countries in the region could find ways to export the oil through other paths, but still it's the most used path for South Korea. Korea, in fact, has a lot of military presence there to protect those assets, and it will create a major economic problem if it happens. Some hours ago, we would believe that this situation would come down. The stock market seemed to have been responding positively to the ceasefire, but with this news that Iran might have broken the ceasefire, this can all come down to the worst case scenario in terms of the increase of like a very significant increase on the prices of oil because of the closing of the Hormuz Strait. But yeah, this decision of not going to NATO, I think it's a way of Seoul asserting their autonomy. They will send a representative, but not as high rank, of course, as the president. And just to say, we will still engage with you, but we are not at least convinced of this proposal of increasing to that extent.
Right, yeah, exactly. Ruy, as you just mentioned, both South Korea, Japan and Australia, they're apparently downgrading their diplomatic presence at NATO this year. I'm afraid that's all the time we have for this edition, but we will be speaking more about the situation in the Middle East on Thursday. For now, though, Ruy, as always, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts.
Thank you very much.
And Celio, thank you very much for your insights. Right, well, that brings us to the end of this edition of Press Perspective. We return same time tomorrow with another panel session, so do join us then.